The stark, unforgiving stage of the courtroom felt a million miles away from the familiar, tense streets of Chicago's South Side as David Miller stood before the legendary Judge Judy, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. The air was thick with unspoken fears and the weight of a single life-altering night. "This is your complaint," Judge Judy began, her voice a blade of cool reason slicing through the room's nervous energy. "You had purchased a car." David, a man whose weary eyes betrayed the constant struggle of keeping his head above water, simply affirmed, "Yes." The judge continued, methodically laying out the foundational facts that everyone agreed upon. "You were behind in the payments." Another quiet, ashamed yes from David. Then she introduced the other key player in this urban drama. "Mr. Henderson owns a tow truck, and it is his job on behalf of lending institutions to repossess property that has not been paid for." The man in question, a tow truck operator named Mark Henderson, stood with a stoic, almost detached expression, a man simply doing his job. Judge Judy painted the scene for the millions watching. "So your car was parked either on the street or in your house?" David clarified, the memory vivid in his mind. "Yes, in front of my house." The date was etched in his memory like a scar. September 25th of last year, a night that began like any other, but would soon spiral into a terrifying chase that defied belief. The inciting incident was relayed with chilling simplicity by the judge. A neighbor came to you in your house and said, "Someone's taking your car." In that moment, David's world, already precarious, tilted on its axis. The primal fear of loss in a neighborhood where loss was a constant companion surged through him. He got outside, his breath catching in the crisp autumn air, and he saw the scene that confirmed his deepest anxieties, Mr. Henderson in his massive, intimidating tow truck down the street with David's car, his only reliable means of getting to work, of providing for his family, attached and being stolen away, or so he believed in his panic state. But David corrected the record with a frantic energy. "No," he interjected, his voice tight with the memory. "Tell me where you saw his car," Judge Judy commanded, demanding precision. What unfolded next was not a simple tale of repossession, but a harrowing story of miscommunication, fear, and a desperate fight for survival. "I observed Mr. Henderson at the end, like a block away, on the passenger side of my car, removing items," David recounted, his words tumbling out as he relived the confusion and the rising tide of anger. "At the same time, I was talking to the police when the neighbor had came and got me." He emphasized the context that was his everyday reality, a crucial detail that colored every one of his actions that night. "I live in a high-crime neighborhood area, and first thing she said, it's a black tow truck. And they took your car and went and rode off." In his mind, in his world, this wasn't a lawful repossession. It was a brazen auto theft, a common occurrence that often left families stranded and helpless. Their possessions vanished into the city's underbelly without a trace. Judge Judy, ever the pragmatist, reframed it. "So the car was attached to the tow truck." "That's what I said." David conceded, yes, but the chasm of understanding between his perspective and the cold, hard legality of the situation was vast and deep. The judge then zeroed in on the central, inescapable truth that David could not avoid. "Now, at the time, you knew that you were behind in payments on the car." David started to offer an explanation, actually. "I had spoken with the guy who," but Judge Judy cut through the justification with the force of a gavel. "At the time, you were behind in payments on the car. You acknowledged it here." With a defeated slump of his shoulders, David admitted, "Yes, I knew I owed some." Judge Judy then delivered a lesson in brutal, street-smart logic. "Right, so an intelligent man would know that if you were behind in payments on the car, they may come and get it." "Not definitely, but they may come and get it." That was what he was hired for. She then turned her interrogative gaze to Mark Henderson. Who hired you to do this job? Henderson responded plainly, Northwest Repossession. Do you know who hired Northwest Repossession? She pressed. The company would be Quality Auto Sales, he stated. The circle was now complete. Did you buy your car at Quality Auto Sales? Judge Judy asked David. Yes, he whispered, the connection now painfully clear. Well, they're the people that hired his company to get their property back. The legal foundation was set in stone. The repossession was lawful. But the human drama, the raw, unfiltered panic that followed, was just beginning to unfold in all its terrifying detail. So tell me what you did, Judge Judy commanded, and David launched into a narrative that sounded more like an action movie script than a courtroom testimony. Okay, when I observed Mr. Henderson at the end of the block, removing items, I caught him on the passenger side of my car, David began, his voice gaining a desperate momentum. He was not just a man defending a complaint. He was a husband, a father, a person fighting for the property he still felt was his, for the security that was being hauled away before his very eyes. At the same time, I was talking to 911 because I figured my car was being stolen. He clung to the belief that a simple conversation could have resolved everything. I had spoke to the person who I previously bought the car from, and everything was fine. Judge Judy immediately challenged this, her disbelief palpable. I don't believe that, and you don't have that person here. David, with no way to prove his claim, could only offer a week. Okay, before plunging back into his story, a man drowning, and the circumstances of that night. At the same time, he tried to continue, but Judge Judy steered him back to the action. Okay, so now just tell me what you did. The what was far more dramatic than any why could justify. Okay, I talked to the police. I asked him who was he. He never identified who he was, David insisted, his frustration boiling over. Judge Judy, impatient for the physical sequence of events, pressed, just a second. I want to know what you did. You ran to the end of the block where he was. David clarified. No, we drove to the end of the block and I observed him. Who drove? The judge asked, piecing together the scene. My wife did, David answered, and in that simple phrase, the entire family unit was drawn into the chaos. His wife, Sarah, was now a participant, her own fear and loyalty propelling her car down the dark street toward an unknown and frightening confrontation. So your wife drove in her car to the end of the block, and then what did you do? Judge. Judy's questions were like stepping stones across a river of panic. I was on the phone with 911, and I told them that I see the guy right there, David said, painting a picture of a man trying to do everything by the book, even as the situation spiraled out of control. Just a second. I didn't ask you what you told anybody. I said, what did? I didn't do anything. I approached him and asked him who was he, David explained, his actions seeming perfectly reasonable from his vantage point. He was a citizen confronting a suspected criminal, his only weapon, his voice, and the phone connection to the police. Just a second, so you approached him. Where was he when you approached him? The passenger side of the car, David recalled, the image crystal clear. And what did he say to you? This was the pivotal moment, the point where the entire night could have de-escalated. He didn't say anything. He just got up and ran around to the driver's side of the tow truck. Mark Henderson's silence, whether born of fear, a desire to avoid confrontation, or a simple commitment to completing his job quickly, was gasoline on the fire of David's suspicion. And by me living in a high-crime neighborhood area, if he would have told me who he was, the situation would have been ended, David pleaded to the judge, to the audience, to anyone who would listen. He did not identify himself or who he was or who had sent him. It's normally known in my neighborhood. I live in Chicago, high crime area, and they're known for taking cars on tow trucks and driving off, and you never find your car again. This was the core of his terror, the context that made his subsequent actions not just understandable, but necessary for his own sense of self-preservation. I asked him who was he. He never identified himself in a professional manner, so I proceeded to talk to the police. I'm like, he's right here. He tried to run around and jump in the car. When he jumped in the tow truck, he tried to close the door, and I'm like, he never identified. I'm like, who are you? I'm steady asking him who is he. He never said anything. So I'm telling the police. The scene was one of pure, unadulterated chaos. A frantic man on the phone with a 911 operator, a tow truck operator sealing himself inside his vehicle, and a wife watching in horror from her car, all under the dim, indifferent glow of the city streetlights.